Alrighty, hello, friends. I'm gonna pop on a few seconds early here just to hang out with chat and do a little intro for our presenter in a second. I see we have a couple of questions in chat, so I figured I'd take those while we kill a little bit of time here. We had a great question here about how to participate in Global Hack Week. The best resource I can point you towards right now is definitely our website. If you just go to globalhackweek.com, I'll post that in the chat in a second. That's going to be a great resource for kind of understanding what all is going on at the event. In general, I would check out Discord. I would check out the challenges. Global Hack Week is kind of like a choose your own adventure week-long hackathon is maybe how I would describe it. Tons of different stuff that you can do, but join in on streams, complete challenges as you're interested in them, and then hang out with the community in Discord and things like that. You're going to be well on your way to having a good time. In our email tomorrow, and if you actually want to go look on our YouTube page, you can find our opening ceremony that goes in a lot more depth about all the awesome things we have going on this week, including our stream that's going to happen here in a second. And then I have one other question. It is not over for today. We've got two more awesome streams at least. I think we might actually have one or two more than that. But it depends on where in the world you're at, how you're counting today as well. But we'll get to that in due time here. So without much further ado here, I'm going to welcome our presenter onto screen here. We're going to be having Paul Young join us here. He's going to be talking about the green side of software and a bunch of the awesome things he's doing around sustainability at GitHub. Very, very excited to have him joining us today. So I'm going to go ahead and pull him on stage here. How are we doing, Paul?
Hey, Ryan. All good. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm in Los Angeles on Pacific time, and it's getting late in my day. So I'm sure for many of you, it's quite late. So I'll try to bring some energy.
Okay.
I'm originally Australian. I talk fast and have a thick Australian accent. So apologies if I go too quickly, and let me know if something I said didn't translate properly.
I have confidence you're going to make it through just fine. I think you're going to be the energy we need here on our Friday night. I'm going to let you dive right into it. As always, I'm right backstage. If y'all need me for anything, I'll be hanging out in the chat. But Paul, you take it away.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I see people saying hi in the chat. That's awesome. Please do stay present in the chat. I'm going to ask for a few contributions on things, and we can ask questions as we go. I'm planning on doing the present part relatively quickly. It's probably like 20 minutes or so. And then we'll have lots of time for questions or to discuss anything that's of interest. So I'd love questions as we go. I work at GitHub. I'm a head of sustainability. I am not a software developer. So I won't be able to answer many technical questions, but I have been working in sustainability and tech for a long time and building web products and web products for good. So if you've got questions about sustainability, the climate, how to take climate action, those are like hot areas for me. But I'm going to run through a bit of grounding in what green software means, share some of the top green software tools on GitHub that you can check out and that you can try and use. And I think that many of you, maybe your early career, are going to be looking for work soon. And I think that having experience with green software tools could be a really cool way to separate you in job interviews or be able to demonstrate that you applied some of these tools, maybe on an open source project or something you're working on, because they're broadly applicable. And I'll talk a little bit about things we're doing for sustainability on GitHub, and then we'll just get straight into questions. So, great. Okay, everyone's got it. Yeah, good. Sounds clear. Yeah, I have what's it called? A Shure MV7 mic. I have a podcast. We haven't done an episode for a while called Climate Dads, DADS. I have two small kids, and me and a friend have talk about how to be a better dad while doing things for the climate. So we got a good mic for that. So I'm glad to hear it's coming through well. Cool. So let's ground in the climate issue. The science is undeniable. I know I'm talking to technical people. So if you follow the science, this is what we're talking about. And this is a visual from an open source GitHub repo. The link is there from Ed Hawkins, who's a British climate scientist. He has this, how much does the Shure mic cost? I think it costs about $70 US, maybe. I could be wrong. Yeah, glad checking it out. So yeah, this visual is from Ed Hawkins' Climate Visuals repo. He has a whole bunch of open source images that visualize climate science and data. I think they're really cool. And this one to me just kind of shows what the climate issue is we're dealing with. So this is the last 2023 years up to 2023. And the red line at the top is the amount of carbon dioxide that is in our atmosphere. And the blue graph at the bottom is the global temperature change. And what you can see over the course of human history is that until the invention of the steam engine several hundred years ago and the start of the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide levels were relatively static. They were just sitting there, sub 300 ppm, and temperature, which correlates to carbon dioxide levels, stayed within a normal range as well. We weren't seeing marked differences in temperatures. That wasn't impacting um, creatures living, and it wasn't impacting extreme weather and changing our weather, but it's directly linked into the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, what started happening after the invention of the steam engine is that humanity started digging up fossil fuels, coal being the most polluting, and it was the main source of energy for many years at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Gas, oil gets dug up at massive amounts and burned. And when we burn these fossil fuels to make energy, the output is carbon dioxide. Also, there's equivalent gases. Methane is another one. A lot of methane is related also to fossil fuels. Some methane is related to cattle primarily. But as we burn fossil fuels, more carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. That red line goes up exponentially up to we're over 421 ppm right now, and the amount of carbon dioxide we produce as societies keeps going up. What that happens is that sits in the atmosphere for about 100 years. And the way I explain it to my 4-year-old daughter is that gas in the atmosphere is sort of like a warm blanket on the earth, and temperature rises as a result. We're now at over 1.2 degrees Celsius of temperature rise. And what we're seeing as a result is massive impacts on extreme weather. More temperature equals more intense hurricanes, equals last week, Hurricane Helene coming through the US and wiping out parts of North Carolina with tremendous rainfall, water being dropped from the atmosphere that we've never seen before. We'll see things like potentially coral reefs going extinct. And what humanity set a goal on with the Paris Agreement is to try to make changes to decarbonize, to cut back on the carbon entering the atmosphere. Primarily, how quickly can we stop burning fossil fuels and use renewable energy instead, to keep us below 1.5 degrees Celsius of temperature rise by 2050. And we are behind target, so we need to do everything we can. And what we're seeing right now is impacts like, the hottest day on record, on human record on Earth was July 22 this year. You can see that graph. This is the graph of temperature since 1980. I'm guessing most of you were born after 1980. I was born in 1983. So this is basically my lifetime of temperature. And it just keeps rising. And it's the hottest year of my lifetime is likely going to be this year. The younger you are, the more the impacts of climate are going to affect you, because these changes are going to lead to species extinction. They're going to lead to flow-on effects that we can't even understand. So that's the science. Happy to answer questions about that or climate action in any way that you'd like. But that's part of the impact we're dealing with. So what can we do? Now, there are many things you can do as an individual. You can make your vote about climate change and support climate smart policies wherever you live at any level, local, federal, state. You can make some key changes in your life, like using renewable energy. I have solar panels on my house. We're in LA. We get a lot of power from the sun. My family, I have a EV and a e-bike. That's how I get around. Not filling up with petrol and burning it in an engine. Personally, I don't eat red meat. Very rarely I have a little bit of lamb, but I know that beef is really climate negative, so I choose not to. So there are impacts you can have personally, but a really powerful impact you can have is through your work. And as a software developer, you have real ability to impact the amount of carbon that your software generates. And that's what I'll touch on today. So how does code impact carbon into the atmosphere? This is a graph from the Green Software Foundation. They have great stuff. Asim Hussain from Green Software Foundation is going to do another talk on green software during this hack, and he is excellent, someone I've learned a lot from. So he's going to probably do an even better job than me of describing a lot of these issues. But basically, when you run code, you run it somewhere on a data center, and that data center requires energy. There's electricity that enters that energy that data center from someplace, and wherever that electricity is being created, there's probably being fossil fuels being burned. That could be oil, it could be coal, it could be gas. Now, if it was 100% nuclear power or renewables like hydro or solar or wind, there would be no carbon emissions from the energy use, but very few grids are decarbonized to that point. Similarly, actually building the data center that's running the software that you've developed, that also required steel, cement, and those processes create a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. The servers themselves are machines that have what they call embodied carbon in them. So there is a carbon impact from every piece of code that's running. So how do we minimize this? How do we be as efficient as possible? Um, it's important to be slightly, I would say, grid aware of where your electricity is coming from to really understand this. So we'll just do a little exercise, and I'll invite everyone watching. Take a look at this web link. You can Google electricity maps, and you'll find a link to their app. Electricity Maps is an open source project. It's on GitHub, so you can also get involved directly with this open source project. They're a great group. They're based in the Nordics. And what they try to do is provide a map in real time. Thank you. The link is now in the chat, app.electricitymaps.com/map. Would love for you to take a look where you are and just post a comment. Like, let us know, like, how intense does your grid look like and what's your main source of energy on your grid right now? Not every grid in the world has data available. If yours doesn't, maybe you could help out. It might just be a matter that nobody's built the API to get power for your region. But here I'm projecting the link, and this is the US at 10 a.m. Pacific time yesterday. It's a similar profile right now, and my grid in California, it's relatively clean. The carbon intensity is relatively low. We've got a lot of solar. The sun shines in California. So solar is clean. We have some nuclear as well. There's a nuclear plant providing impact on the grid. There's batteries that are getting filled. So all of that is clean power that's not producing carbon, but there is some gas that's there as well, and the gas produces carbon. Now, if we can imagine a lot of gas in New Jersey and lots of nuclear, a lot of gas in lots of parts of the US. I'd be interested if people have other examples as you come through. Now, if you imagine that you had code running on a data center somewhere, it would really matter where on this map it was as to how clean the energy source was. If it's in California, it'd be pretty clean. If you're up in Washington, some of our data centers for GitHub are in Washington, and Washington's a great grid. It's got a lot of hydro. Nothing on Kenya, no data. Yeah, there are gaps in many data sources, but there may be ways that you could help that open source project, Cynthia, getting some data from Kenya. Maybe the local utilities don't have data to share. Maybe no one's built it. I'm sure the Electricity Maps team would love to get a comment from you on their open source project to help out. It'd be cool to see Kenya appear. Someone in New England who's dirtier than California. Yeah, that is interesting. And it might be different on your microgrid level, but they have pretty good coverage. Also, maybe at noon, instead of 5 p.m., it might have been more solar on your grid. It's hard to know. But if your data center, as you can imagine, was in Washington, super clean. But if the same data center was in eastern Colorado in the middle of this map where it's brown, or in Nebraska, Wyoming, it's probably a coal-heavy grid. It's going to be very dirty. And the same data center would be way dirty, producing way more carbon. So it's one thing to be aware of, but it's interesting to know, like, where does the power really come from, and think through, like, if we're making code, a physical machine has to run somewhere, and that physical machine creates carbon. I see someone in Toronto, Canada, with lots of nuclear energy and some hydro in Toronto. I'm personally biased. I really like nuclear. I think it has to be part of the solution, but hey, as long as it's not adding carbon into the atmosphere, I'm a fan. Give me nuclear, give me hydro, give me wind, give me solar. It's my personal bias. So yeah, I thought that would be an interesting exercise to be aware of your grid, and you can also be aware of where your grids run. So when we think about what makes software green, this is another slide from the Green Software Foundation. I also see a comment linking to the talk that Asim Hussain, the head of the Green Software Foundation, will be doing on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Like, big shout out. That will be a really good talk. But to make software green, there's 3 key elements, and there's really 2 of them that I'm going to touch on today. One is energy efficiency. So how can software use the least amount of energy possible? Because the less waste, the less electricity that's being used, the less that somewhere a gas plant or a coal plant has to fire up. So energy efficiency is awesome. Second is hardware efficiency. This is kind of the other side to software, so I'm not going to touch on that a lot today, but that's to use the least amount of embodied carbon. Embodied carbon means for the physical things that were created to build the various machines that we run software on, how much carbon was used to make them. So if you think about one data center, there is concrete. Concrete creates a lot of carbon when it's being made. There's steel. Steel as well creates a lot of carbon, and these haven't had great solutions yet to make them clean. Inside, there's machines, and the machines have metals inside them that had to be mined somewhere. The machines might be made of plastic, could be recycled, which would be awesome, or it may not be recycled, in which case most plastic is used, it comes from oil. So a large percentage of the carbon impact can often be what's embodied in these machines. Now, again, efficient code requires less machines. So if you had the same software project and one was 10 times more efficient than the other, it might require way less machines. So not only would that require less electricity to run the machines, it would also mean that less machines need to be built. So that's good news for the embodied carbon. The third pillar, after energy efficiency and hardware efficiency, is carbon awareness. And this is about basically when can we do work when electricity is clean and do less when it's dirty. Now, my analogy here, I always try to plug my electric car in the day in California because I know at 12 noon in sunny Los Angeles, my grid is heavily solar and basically sunlight is filling up my car. If I plug the car in overnight, there's no solar and it's a gas plant that's bringing me power. So that's a small thing that I do, but your code could do the same. Your code could choose to run up in Washington on a data center instead of in maybe Poland on a coal fired grid, or potentially you might have a job that could run at a certain time. Like, wouldn't it be great if that could run in the middle of the day, the same as my car fills up on California sunshine when there's a lot of solar on the grid? So energy efficiency, hardware efficiency, carbon awareness, the three principles to make software green. And I'm going to start moving towards now some of the tools that you can check out. Oh, cool. Someone said they never thought about it. It's Lightning. Cool. Yeah, a lot of this was new to me as well. So it's cool to think about the way these things frame up. And the Green Software Foundation, where Asim will be doing the talk on Monday at 11 a.m. EST in this hack, they on their website have some great educational resources too, so you can check those out. Now, I'd love to invite you to start this repo. This is one of the challenges for the hack. But this is a repo we just built at GitHub, the Green Software Directory, and it's linked in the chat as well. And we basically at GitHub, my team spent a couple of months just doing research to try to identify every single green software tool that exists on GitHub, every open source green software project, and organize them and categorize them in one place. So if you star this repo, you will have it on hand anytime in your career, and there'll be different green software tools that you can use. We hope to grow this list over time. We're maintaining it. If we're missing something that you found, like, please give us a pull request and let us know, because we're trying to keep this list really up to date. But this can hopefully just be something that you have in your back pocket to be familiar with these tools, and no matter where you wind up in your career or what project you're working on, you can bring green software skills to the fore, and you can use these tools to make the code greener. This is a little bit of what it looks like, but you'll scan down, you'll see it. So the link is in the comments, but please do star it, keep track of this resource. And I'm going to go through now the top 10 most starred tools within this list. So how we built the list was we looked for specific terms like carbon aware commuting, green software, and ways that the tools describe themselves, that they were trying to have a pro-environment, low-carbon impact. So if the tool was self-describing as like part of its purpose was to help with green software objectives, we included it on the list. And then we simply made the top 10, we pulled out, we put them on the GitHub blog recently, so you can check that out on the GitHub blog. But right now I'll run through them. I'll give a few, like 3 things to know on each of the tools. Reminder, I'm non-technical, so I can't answer, unfortunately, any technical question on them, but I'm sure the maintainers of all of these communities, they're all open source projects, they would love to have involvement and thoughts. Okay, so now I apologize if anyone is a native French speaker. Maybe you're in France or West Africa or somewhere else. because I'm Australian and I cannot pronounce French words very well. But the number one tool with the most stars is Scaphandre. I don't think I did that very well. It's a French word. Scaphandre is the French word for those cool old school diving suits. You can actually see the icon and the screen grab on the screen. And I kind of love the analogy of the name, because for a lot of these green software principles, you have to really dig down deep into data. You have to dive deep on data to understand what's the green software impact. So what Scaphandre does is it's all about power consumption. So it's linked into energy efficiency. It measures the power consumption on bare metal and virtual machines, and it integrates easily with measurement tools like Prometheus and JSON that you might be using to give you power consumption data. So this is designed to be a tool to really help you with energy efficiency by understanding what's power consumption's happening with the code that I'm running when it goes to physical machines. Number two, the second most starred tool on our list is Kepler, the Kubernetes-based efficient power level exporter. This is Kubernetes focused, as the title would lead you to believe, and it's all about real-time power for Kubernetes environment, monitoring energy usage at the process, container, and Kubernetes pod level. So you can really dig into like where is power happening across the Kubernetes environment. It's designed particularly for cloud-native environments. Number three, Code Carbon. Code Carbon's a relatively newer tool, and I've been seeing it get a lot more stars and interest. So it seems to be, to some extent, the rising star in the green software world. And this tool in particular focuses on CO2 emissions. So Scaphandre was power. Kepler was looking at power across Kubernetes environments. Code Carbon is really interested in the carbon impact, especially for AI and ML use cases. So what it does is, you'll see it in the graph on the side, where it first looks at the hardware energy consumption across GPUs, CPUs, and RAM, and then compares that with where is this work running. So where's the regional carbon intensity of electricity, similar to the map we were just looking at. So thinking about the geographic location of country grids at the country level, where could we run jobs and how would that impact the carbon? So it allows developers both to impact carbon through efficiency, but also thinking about the region of the work and load shifting and moving jobs to areas that are greener. All right, tool number 4, KubeGreen. KubeGreen is actually an efficiency play, and it's much more of, rather than a monitoring tool, it's kind of an action tool. And what it does is it automatically shuts down Kubernetes resources in off hours. I like to think of it as it's sort of like the software version of turning off the lights when you leave a room. So it reduces energy consumption, but it can also save money because it turns off things that aren't in use. You don't have to pay for them. It's ideal for dev environments, particularly one where maybe you use it during work hours, but no one's using it outside of work hours, and it can just shut off and you don't have to pay for it, and it doesn't use any energy, which means that no carbon's burned to create that energy anywhere in the world. Okay, so that's KubeGreen. Number 5 of 10, halfway through, Cloud Carbon Footprint. Cloud Carbon Footprint measures and monitors carbon of cloud services. So particularly if you've got jobs running on AWS or Google or Azure, it provides actionable recommendations to cut emissions based on the data it pulls in. So you can make changes to improve the efficiency. And it has extensive integration options. Yeah, there's just ways you can see multiple services in one view or over one time frame. So Cloud Carbon Footprint, if you're out there in the cloud, can be a really helpful tool. Tool number 6, from the Green Software Foundation, who I've mentioned a few times. Our friends over there, I'm sure Asim on Monday will talk about this as well. This is the Carbon Aware SDK. The Green Software Foundation have a variety of helpful tools. They also have a great list of green software tools that you can find on GitHub. The Carbon Aware SDK helps you optimize where services run based on real-time carbon intensity data. They actually use the electricity map service that I was sharing earlier, and allows you to shift workloads. It has a web API and CLI, so ways to work on it. But what they try to do is use this electricity maps data and really have you think about, all right, where's my job running? Let's be carbon aware. Let me move things around to make them cleaner, and the same work can get done. But because it happens on a clean grid versus a dirtier grid, suddenly it's a much cleaner job that's producing less carbon. So really easy to make that move, and much more impact than if you make a change in your own diet and choose to ride a bike instead of drive a car tomorrow. Tool number 7, CO2.js. JavaScript tool. This is from the Green Web Foundation, who are another awesome group thinking about this issue. Their lead guy named Chris Adams, who has a great podcast called Environmental Variables. That's really fun listen if you're interested in this topic. I subscribe to it, and it teaches me something new every week when a new podcast comes out. Environmental Variables. CO2.js is a JavaScript library to estimate emissions, especially around data transfer. And it monitors emissions right to every byte of data. So it really gets focused here. So, if you're working in JavaScript, CO2.js can be a great tool for you. Number 8, we're getting right to the end of the list now, and we're getting a bit more specific of the use cases. Carbon Tracker. This is for ML model training. So if you're doing some machine learning work and model training out there, it predicts energy and CO2 use during training. But what is cool is that it gives you real-time predictions after the first training epoch to allow optimization. So as you're running it, you can get immediate optimizations that will save you money because less energy is used and less cycles need to run, as well as being better for the environment. It's a Python tool, supports Intel CPU, NVIDIA GPUs, and Apple Silicon. Number 9, Kernel Tuner. This tool optimizes GPU kernels across multiple compilers, uses auto tuning to boost performance and energy efficiency for the GPUs, and it has some energy monitoring capabilities like power mapping. And finally, the 10th tool on the list, Experiment Impact Tracker. This is a bit more of an academic use case, but ML and AI focused. It tracks energy, carbon, and hardware usage during machine learning. Has detailed logs and carbon impact reports that are great for academic papers as people try to size like what's going to be the impact of AI on grids. Works on Linux and Macs and with Intel CPUs and NVIDIA GPUs. So that's the top 10 list. There's a blog post on GitHub's blog with them listed, some of the same information, and all of them are within the Green Software repo that hopefully you just start. It's in the chat, so you can go to the repo and star it, so that you can access it anytime. Whichever of these tools felt resonant to you and work you're doing, please visit the tools, star the tools, get involved. They're all open source projects, but we'd love to hear examples of them being used. To finish up, I'll just finish with a few minutes on how GitHub thinks about sustainability as a company and a few of the things we're doing, and then would love to take questions of any type, whatever you want to talk about, if we have time, and we will probably finish a little early if we don't, but I'd love to take questions, so please post them at any time, start thinking about them. I'd love to hear questions shortly. So at GitHub, when we think about our climate work, we believe our mission is to accelerate climate progress through developer collaboration. We always think of developers first. Developers are our core audience. The open source community, we care deeply about them, and everything we choose to do is how can we help developers along, how can we help them have more impact. In this case, how can we work together with developers to have a positive impact on the climate? Now, first, that means how do we as a company take responsibility and limit our impact as much as possible? Now, GitHub is owned by Microsoft, and so we line up with their sustainability goals. I work closely with the Microsoft sustainability team, who are really some extraordinary people, and they're working on every aspect of it. So there's people who are thinking about, how do we recycle server parts against our zero waste goals from Azure? You name it, there's someone focused on reducing the carbon within the business. But there's 4 major goals that we line up with. The first is to be carbon negative by 2030. So by 2030, how do we drop our carbon emissions as much as possible? We use 100% renewable energy. We have a commitment to that. So how can we use more renewable energy for all of our operations everywhere? How can we help all of Azure jobs run on renewable electricity? And for the remainder, where we can't remove things, like, for example, we build new data centers now, and you can't buy 100% pure cement and steel that would have zero carbon impact yet. We try to fund startups and work in that space, but there will be carbon in operations. Our carbon has actually been rising despite our goals to reduce it. So we also work to remove carbon. We buy carbon removals of various types to remove carbon from the atmosphere, and we're aiming to do that by 2050, removing all of our emissions back to 1975 when Bill Gates started the company in a garage in Seattle. Now, it's not just about carbon, though. We also have goals to be water positive. There's a lot of water use in data center operations, either for cooling or a lot of time when fossil fuels are generated and transported, there's also water that's used and wasted. So we track all the water use by operations, and by 2030, our goal is to replenish more water than we consume. So both we have efficiency work to drop the water use in all of our operations, but then also for what we have to use, we then partner with organizations that will do things to replenish water. Like that might be like helping farms with new irrigation techniques to use less water to offset the water that we're using, or working with local nonprofits who might be protecting a river. Zero waste by 2030, having zero waste across our direct waste footprint. Now, this is not just about the fact that we recycle in our offices and have always used compost for our food scraps when employees are eating. Really, most of this goal is focused on data centers and how can we have what we call circularity in data centers, and how can we reuse as many parts as possible? Because again, if you can recycle and reuse a part, you don't have to go out there and acquire it somehow. If you can take metal out of a machine and use that metal to build another server, that saves you from having to do mining to get those out of the ground somewhere. And the mining process and the transport process would burn a lot of fossil fuel. So zero waste is another important goal. And then finally, protect and preserve ecosystems, protecting more land than we use by 2025, and building a planetary computer that I see people talking about. Yeah, you can check out the Microsoft Planetary Computer. It's cool stuff on that front. And thank you for questions starting to come in. Please keep posting them, and they can be across the board. It's much easier for me to answer questions about climate than hardcore technical dev questions, but I'm happy to talk about anything that you would find valuable. Just to finish up on GitHub strategy. So we think about 3 pillars. First, green GitHub. So this is, how do we line up with Microsoft? How do we achieve the goals I just talked about? We're growing as a company. We have more developers joining our platform. We have developers using Copilot. So we are a growing company. How do we reduce our environmental impact as we scale? That's our green GitHub goal. It's our responsibility. It's really all on us to do great work here, to use 100% renewable electricity, to limit the impact of our operations. That's not enough for us, though. Second piece is, how do we help green our industry? That is why we are taking an effort to map all the green software tools, to educate people. We want to help skill developers. We would like every soft developer to understand what green software is and how they could make their projects greener. Because if the whole industry does this, and if we only make our industry like 10 or 20% greener, that's going to be a massive positive impact on the globe against our carbon targets. Finally, our final pillar is to green the globe. And we haven't talked about this much yet today, but when we think about greening the globe, we like to think about how can we help pro-climate open source projects grow and have more impact. And this is cool stuff you can get involved in. So the example would be, there's a great project and repo, Open Sustainable Technology. Another one I would encourage you to check out and have a play around with. This is an open source project that's been listing and categorizing positive climate open source projects, and they have thousands on their list. There's everything from open source projects that help with biodiversity, that track wildfires, that help map extreme weather so that you might know if a hurricane's coming. The electricity maps project that I shared and that we all had a look at, that's on the list. There's tech to optimize solar panels, like you name it. There is a positive open source community starting to build around it, tackle these challenges, and they would love more involvement. So, if you're looking for something to volunteer time on or to learn on, this list could be a way to do it in a really meaningful way. You could just look around for whatever issue is the most compelling to you. You could probably find a relevant open source project and contribute to it. They also have a subsite, climatetriage.com, and these are good first issues on the projects that are on their climate list. So another really cool tool if you're looking for some ways to get involved. You're like, oh, I'd love to learn software development, get some cool stuff from my resume, and do some good for the planet. Climatetriage.com is a great place to start. So with that, I'm going to move towards questions. I see a couple already. I love it and happy to add even more. So please just keep on adding things in as we go. First question I might take, I'll just see the top one on the list I see is from MP Siebert. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Curious for your thoughts on buying carbon credits as an individual. Yeah, so there's a big debate about this one. I'll give you my personal opinion, and you can research it. So I think as an individual, I just try to think about it in terms of my own footprint. How big is my footprint? How can I reduce my footprint as much as possible? And how can I do good things to offset the impact I have? So for me in my life, that means first, and this is the same way companies think about it. The first thing we need to do is reduce our footprint before we do any form of offsets. So I try in my life to really think about this analytically, and there's a lot of pushback on like carbon calculators and things, but I like to understand it. When my family bought a car, we chose to buy an EV, and now we love it. We don't have to really do any maintenance. There's no oil to change. We don't have to pay for fuel, and gas got really expensive. It's really cool. And I have an e-bike, which for a long time we had instead of a car because I live on a big hill. And the e-bike, I plug into the wall, and it's great. It's nearly as good as having a car. Then I got kids, and they don't all fit on the bike. So first, I try to reduce my footprints, but for me, I still have a pretty big footprint because I fly, and some of that is flying for work, and I sometimes have to go for places. I was at a green software conference in London trying to spread this, and I try to always think about like how can I limit that as much as possible? How can I choose the most optimized flight, but it's still there? And I don't live with my family, so if I want to see my family, which I try to do every other year, someone's got to get on a plane. So I think there is a place for carbon credits as an individual. Um, I I choose like kind of high end ones. You can do a bit of research on this, but I can't remember the name of it. There's a company that Microsoft actually funds that Bill Gates uses for personal offsets that I did. This does like rock weathering, so it's about a process that has rocks absorb carbon for a long time, and it's more expensive, but I think it's really high quality, so that's the one I choose. So yeah, personal choice. I think a good framework is to first reduce, then offset. But big picture, what I hope to do with my career is do 10, 20, 30 times the impact of my own footprint through making my career about the climate. So that's one way I think about it. Okay, great. And let's stay with this. I see a comment from this RS Swift that I think is a great big question, and Shem Marie was plus 100%ing it. I think this is important as an individual to be climate aware and do my part, but often feels like a bigger problem than the individual. How do you stay motivated to make personal change when larger orgs feel like the real problem? This is like a great debate in the climate space, like individual versus social responsibility. My favorite discussion of it was on a podcast called All We Can Save with Dr. Iana Johnson and Dr. Leah Stokes, who are two brilliant climate scientists. And they just talked about this topic. And one of the things that Dr. Leah Stokes, who's brilliant, kind of the point she made that really landed with me was that every individual action matters because every single bit of carbon we don't put in the atmosphere matters. But it doesn't just matter just because, if I had electricity in my house instead of my solar panels, it would be like X carbon. Every time you make a decision like that, you send a signal to companies. You basically vote with your wallet, is the expression that Leah Stokes had. So, like for example, my family doesn't eat beef anymore, and we haven't for years. And so every time we've gone to a restaurant, every time we've gone somewhere else, we've chosen fish or chicken. And if you run the restaurant, you start to see people make these changes, and that's how system change happens. There's scientific studies that show more solar panels happen in a neighborhood when people see them on other people's roof because people do activities like them. So it's really interesting. Like that's how major change happens. But at the same time, yes, big companies and governments have tremendous responsibility. So on that front, I make my vote about climate. Every candidate I vote for, I research their climate positions and I make my vote about it. I will vote for the more climate positive candidate in any election, and I always vote, and I think it's very important. Secondly, I care about my company's footprint. So I work at a company that has a net zero carbon goal. The best standard, if you're a big company, is you should have a net zero goal. That means you're taking it seriously. That means that you have a target that you're working against. It should be in line with science-based targets. Ideally, it should be soon. At Microsoft, ours is 2030 at GitHub. So for me, it's yes, all of the above. But you as an individual in a system, your choices really matter beyond just what they signify. So that's sort of how I think about that, but it's a big debate. And absolutely, like companies and governments have like even more responsibility than us as individuals, but we matter. So let me see. Now, another question. The podcast I recommended was All We Can Save. And there was an episode on that. Dr. Ayana Johnson and Dr. Leah Stokes. I'll pull up a question about nuclear. I'm not really an expert on this, but from Shem Marie, so nuclear is actually better for the environment in terms of sustainability. I read that Microsoft is going to use the defunct 3 mile line in PA. There's another debate about nuclear. So I can tell you my personal opinion. I think that people are really coming around on nuclear, though. Is nuclear better for the environment or sustainability? Hard question. On the one side, nuclear does not create any carbon footprint. Nuclear is renewable energy. So a nuclear plant versus a coal plant producing the same amount of electricity, that coal plant is going to produce a huge amount of carbon that's going to be in the atmosphere for 100 years and contributing to this problem. The nuclear plant will not. The nuclear plant will have some waste, and that does some of that waste we don't have a solution for yet about what to do with it long term. There's also has been historically risks on we've never had a fatality, I don't believe, in the US from a nuclear accident, but people, you've probably seen the TV show Chernobyl, but that was 50 years ago. In Eastern Europe, we have different technology now. So personally, I'm a big believer. I just think we have to have nuclear in the mix because we need sources of power that are renewable but constant, because there's no solar at nighttime and there's no wind when the wind doesn't blow, but nuclear can run 24/7. And yes, Microsoft just last week made a commitment to buy all the energy from the nuclear plant at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. That's in line with our 100% renewable electricity goals. And personally, as an individual, I felt really proud that my company did that. And I, as an individual, believe that we need more nuclear. We need more of every form of renewable energy because of that carbon graph that I worry so much about that I showed you guys in the first slide. I'm just looking which question I haven't answered yet. Yeah, we can touch on EVs. How to respond to folks who don't want to switch to EV due to such reasons as widespread battery longevity issues, batteries going to landfills. I'm still seeing how electric is still better than traditional energy. So I think first and foremost, it's like if you don't have to drive a car, it's actually no car is great for the environment. If you can get around on public transport and a bike, like, gosh, I love Amsterdam. If you've ever been there, it's so easy to ride around on a bike. So don't, if you've never tried an e-bike, check them out. They're awesome. You can get a long way on an e-bike, but I live in LA. I got kids. I need a car. We chose an EV. I did a lot of research on it. There's been good write-ups on this, so you can just have a Google and find reports on it. But from my research, yes, there is an environmental impact of a big battery, but it's way less than 20 years of putting petrol, gas into a car and burning it. And so it just offsets very quickly. And also, I saw a study the other day, an academic study that looked at this analysis, and it basically did a embodied carbon analysis, similar way I was talking about servers. So the way the car was built, what's all the impact of creating the battery versus the other parts, versus like its lifetime of operations. Even on the dirtiest grid, even if you were running on a pure coal grid and plugging in an EV every night, so it was only getting charged with coal power that's really, really dirty, it would still be better for the environment than putting a hose in, filling it up with petrol that you then set on fire in the engine and push stuff out the back. I also like when we one day live on 100% EVs, the air is going to be cleaner and we're going to have less asthma and less deaths from air pollution. So I'm really into that as well. What was my podcast? My podcast was called Climate Dads, DADS. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's for parenting. So if you're a dad, you might enjoy it. We did a series. Someone posted, Mickey D Express posted a greenwashing repo. Greenwashing, if you hadn't said the term, is as a term about when particularly companies will make false green claims or claim things to be good that are actually bad. I haven't seen what's in that repo in particular, but greenwashing is common. I might have. If there's, I'll wait for any other questions. I'm just scanning. I think I got through the questions on the thread. I really appreciate getting the questions too. Hopefully there's some value in those things. I love yabbering about this stuff. Oh, great question. Curious if you can share more about how you do your research, any particular sites that you like. Great question. So one thing, I actually built a ChatGPT custom extension that I used as the background sources, just IPCC reports. IPCC reports are some of the best climate science, and I built a repo where you could ask a repo. I built a I don't know, they call them extensions in ChatGPT, plugins. Uh, I built one where if you could ask a climate question, it would go to that source material. It's not perfect, but it's out there. So I think first and foremost, like there is really good science out there, and now with tools like ChatGPT or Notebook LM, it becomes more accessible to get into that science. I feel like. Um, I always try to go to the science where it exists. Second is there's some really good climate oriented news titles. So Axios have AXIOS have a climate newsletter that's really good daily. Political do a daily climate or daily or a few times a week climate email. The New York Times has a great climate email and list. I like to follow a lot of those leading experts. So I think if you get around a lot of those, you can get there. And then otherwise, it's just a bit of Googling and trying to look for like, is there a scientific report on all of this stuff? Because there is misinformation in the space. There is a lot of like the EV thing, for example. There's so much misinformation from a lot of vested interests that really want to keep selling petrol cars. But then you look for like, show me the data, show me science that demonstrates it. Also, there's a lot of science on GitHub, so you might be able to just find a repo and find like first person data as opposed to relying on media or other sources. So yeah, that's a few. And then when I find smart people, I like to follow them on LinkedIn. A lot of people I feel like are moving to LinkedIn talk more about this. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'll be sharing green software stuff. I'm one of the only Paul with 2 L's youngs out there. Yeah. There's a good podcast too, so you can Google around for those. Oh, cool. I see more questions, so I'm happy to keep going. I see from McSizzle Bunny, I love the name. Has it been tricky to get supplier companies to be greener at the source for hardware, e.g. microchips and other components? Seems like such a competitive area to change. I'm no expert here. I haven't worked directly on the supply chain piece myself. I will share. I've been more on the kind of product impact side. I think it can always be hard. It's easier to some extent to decarbonize tech than like a physical component. Like ultimately, like you need to have metal in a chip and you need to like produce a real world thing. The world is carbonized, so it's like hard to do a lot of these processes without it. There's different ways. Microsoft, I know we're very focused on the supply chain right now and on helping suppliers make the green change, on helping to understand impacts, to share education, to do training. We also have a special fund where in certain industries, like for cement, for steel, for sustainable aviation fuels, I think there's also some for zero waste. We have funding where we're trying to help companies like start up and scale that are solving these problems, because we would rather pay a green premium and pay more money for a greener impact. But yeah, it's hard. Okay, I see a question from ZS0707. How serious is AI's climate impact, especially with the growing misinformation people are spreading about it? I'm not sure entirely what you mean by the growing misinformation people are spreading about it. So you might be able to clarify a little bit, but AI's climate impact. So this is a debate. AI certainly has additional energy usage. We are seeing it's a new technology and it's a new thing and it uses energy. Also, it's driving a lot of like big share prices and stuff. Like I think Nvidia might be the most valuable company in the world now because of their GPUs, their AI chips. So more data centers has a climate impact, more energy use has a climate impact. My belief and hope is that the positive impacts of AI will be much more than the negative impacts of the energy use that it requires to run AI. I also think we're typically pretty good at finding efficiencies. So, like for example, 10 years ago, there was predictions from very serious people that the energy use of the internet as we currently use it, like think about like last night, my wife and I were streaming different things on Netflix at the same time. That's a lot of if you told me that type of streaming was happening at once in my house 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to believe it. I started my life with dial-up internet, um, Oh, I see the extension from ZSO7. I mean, I see people acting like it's unethical to use AI at all. Yeah, okay. So it's that angle on the debate. Yeah, so there's a whole range here. There's a range of the AI energy use is so bad, we're not getting enough value from it. It's all a waste. And there's the other side. I probably definitely lead towards more of this, my bias towards this side, that I believe the impact of AI will be more positive, because like I'm not technical and I was able to build a cool GPT extension to allow anyone to access IPCC knowledge. And I think that types of thing is really valuable. I also was just at Climate Week New York with a group called Climate Change AI. We sponsor them at GitHub. They have a great free summer school to bring together the AI ML communities and the climate science communities. And I saw researcher after researcher doing pro climate work at a rate that they never would have been able to do before AI and ML tools, analyzing more data in more custom ways. So my belief is that it's gonna open opportunities to decarbonize the world in a way that we never thought possible, and therefore will have much more impact than its energy use. I also believe that we will get better at efficiency. We'll get smarter about carbon awareness. We have to, that we'll work out how to decarbonize it. AI is not going anywhere, so we have no choice but to make it as low impact as possible, is sort of my belief. So I have a bias, but that's where I land. Cool, and I see some great chats going back and forth. Research papers and websites about program energy consumption. Yep, I've seen some of those out there. Work to combat the energy from AI. Yes. I also, the other thing I saw that was interesting, at Climate Week, I was at another talk on AI and energy grids, and Lucas Joppa, who used to work at Microsoft but now is a VC, was making this good point that we've got new demand on grids, because there's we'd expected the internet and tech to grow, but now it's growing faster than we expected because AI didn't exist. And honestly, yeah, 6 or 7 years ago, blockchain didn't exist, and that's very energy hungry. But because many of the companies like Microsoft are committed to clean energy, this is also bringing incredible investment in clean energy. So I believe it's good that a Microsoft is funding, reopening, buying all the electricity from 3 Mile Island instead of it shutting down. Because then the AI use that from that energy, is effectively clean. So anyway, that's my take. And yeah, I'm no expert on the cryptocurrency side. I personally find that more troublesome because you could do more crypto forever, and it's very, very, like mining Bitcoin is extremely energy hungry. As I understand, I think Ethereum was built part to take that on, but again, it's not my expertise area. Love this chat. Feels like you guys are sitting here with me. So we might be running out of steam, so we might be getting to the end. I'll just pause, but thank you everyone who asked questions. McSizzle Bunny, ASA707, Shem Marie. I probably missed one or two other awesome questions from folks, but thank you. Mickey D Express. A lot of mix going on. NPC, but thank you all. And thank you everyone for listening. Star the Repo, thank you for taking part in it. We'd love you to become green software practitioners, and a Sims talk on Monday will be awesome as well. So strongly encourage attending that.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was awesome. I really enjoyed listening to that in the background, and some great questions in chat. Really appreciate you joining us. For folks in the chat here, we are going to have another stream in a couple of minutes' time. I'm going to post a bunch of the links that Paul talked about over the course of his talk there. So if you're looking for something to do over the next 10 minutes or so, check all of those out, including all of the awesome challenges that the GitHub sustainability team has for you this week. And otherwise, we'll see you all in a couple of minutes. Thank you all so much, and happy hacking. See you, everyone.